Good morning, class. Today we will be starting a new novel, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. But before we do that, I would like you to help me make a list of some of the problems you face as teenagers. It's okay to mention things that you can't normally talk about in school. For example, underage drinking. What are some of the other problems you face? Drugs. Parents. Maybe if they're really strict, or if they put a lot of pressure on you, or if they fight all the time. All right. Anything else? Peer pressure. Depression. Smoking. Loneliness. Sometimes, even if we're surrounded by people, we still feel alone. Exhaustion. You have so much work and so many activities that you don't get enough sleep and you're just tired all the time. Boredom. Even with all that work, you still are bored in class. This is a pretty solid list of issues, and they take up much of your time and energy, right? The main character of the book we will be reading, Holden Caulfield, is a teenage boy who is experiencing many of these same problems. I think you'll enjoy this novel a lot because you'll be able to relate to Holden's struggles. Please pull out your copy of The Catcher in the Rye. Today we will be doing a close reading activity using the first chapter of the book. You will read silently to yourself, annotating as you read. You should read carefully and slowly, underlining or circling anything that you find important or that you don't understand, as well as making notes and observations in the margins. You should reread the passage for a second time if you finish early, looking for things you may have missed the first time. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and I will come to you. You may begin now.
If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap, but I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. In the first place, that stuff bores me, and in the second place, my parents would have about 2 hemorrhages apiece if I told anything pretty personal about them. They're quite touchy about anything like that, especially my father. They're nice and all, I'm not saying that, but they're also touchy as hell. Besides, I'm not going to tell you my whole goddamn autobiography or anything. I'll just tell you about this madman stuff that happened to me around last Christmas, just before I got pretty run down and had to come out here and take it easy. I mean, that's all I told DB about, and he's my brother and all. He's in Hollywood. That isn't too far from this crummy place, and he comes over and visits me practically every weekend. He's going to drive me home when I go home next month, maybe. He just got a Jaguar, one of his little English jobs that can do around 200 miles an hour. Cost him damn near $4,000. He's got a lot of dough now. He didn't used to. He used to be just a regular writer when he was home. He wrote this terrific book of short stories, The Secret Goldfish, in case you never heard of him. The best one in it was The Secret Goldfish. It was about this little kid that wouldn't let anybody look at his goldfish because he'd bought it with his own money. It killed me. Now he's out in Hollywood, DB, being a prostitute. If there's one thing I hate, it's the movies. Don't even mention them to me. Where I want to start telling is the day I left Pincy Prep. Pincy Prep is this school that's in Agertown, Pennsylvania. You've probably heard of it. You've probably seen the ads, anyway. They advertise in about 1,000 magazines, always showing some hotshot guy on a horse jumping over a fence. Like as if all you ever did at Pincy was play polo all the time. I never even once saw a horse anywhere near the place.
And underneath the guy on the horse's picture, it always says, "Since 1888, we have been molding boys into splendid, clear-thinking young men." Strictly for the birds. They don't do any damn more molding at Pincy than they do at any other school. And I didn't know anybody there that was splendid and clear-thinking and all. Maybe two guys, if that many. And they probably came to Pincy that way.
Anyway, it was the Saturday of the football game with Saxon Hall. The game with Saxon Hall was supposed to be a very big deal around Pincy. It was the last game of the year, and you were supposed to commit suicide or something if old Pincy didn't win. I remember around 3 o'clock that afternoon I was standing way the hell up on top of Thompson Hill, right next to this crazy cannon that was in the Revolutionary War and all. You could see the whole field from there, and you could see the two teams bashing each other all over the place. You couldn't see the grandstand too hot, but you could hear them all yelling, deep and terrific on the Pincy side, because practically the whole school except me was there, and Scrawny and Faggy on the Saxon Hall side, because the visiting team hardly ever brought many people with them. There were never many girls at the football games. Only seniors were allowed to bring girls with them. It was a terrible school, no matter how you looked at it. I like to be somewhere at least where you can see a few girls around once in a while, even if they're only scratching their arms or blowing their noses or even just giggling or something. Old Selma Thurmer, she was the headmaster's daughter, showed up at the games quite often, but she wasn't exactly the type that drove you mad with desire.
She was a pretty nice girl, though. I sat next to her once in the bus from Agertown, and we sort of struck up a conversation. I liked her. She had a big nose, and her nails were all bitten down and bleedy looking, and she had on those damn falsies that point all over the place, but you sort of felt sorry for her. What I liked about her, she didn't give you a lot of horse manure about what a great guy her father was. She probably knew what a phony slob he was.
The reason I was standing way up on Thompson Hill instead of down at the game was because I'd just gotten back from New York with the fencing team. I was the goddamn manager of the fencing team. Very big deal. We'd gone into New York that morning for this fencing meet with the McBurney School. Only we didn't have the meet. I left all the foils and equipment and stuff on the goddamn subway. It wasn't all my fault. I had to keep getting up to look at this map so we'd know where to get off. So we got back to Pincy around 2:30 instead of around dinner time. The whole team ostracized me the whole way back on the train. It was pretty funny, in a way. The other reason I wasn't down at the game was because I was on my way to say goodbye to old Spencer, my history teacher. He had the grip, and I figured I probably wouldn't see him again till Christmas vacation started. He wrote me this note saying he wanted to see me before I went home. He knew I wasn't coming back to Pincy. Forgot to tell you about that. They kicked me out. I wasn't supposed to come back after Christmas vacation on account of I was flunking 4 subjects and not applying myself and all. They gave me frequent warning to start applying myself, especially around midterms when my parents came up for a conference with old Thurmer, but I didn't do it. So I got the axe. They give guys the axe quite frequently at Pincy. It has a very good academic rating, Pincy. It really does. Anyway, it was December and all, and it was cold as a witch's teat, especially on top of that stupid hill. I only had on my reversible and no gloves or anything. The week before that, somebody had stolen my camel's hair coat right out of my room, with my fur-lined gloves right in the pocket and all. Pincy was full of crooks. Quite a few guys came from these very wealthy families, but it was full of crooks anyway.
The more expensive a school is, the more crooks it has. I'm not kidding. Anyway, I kept standing next to that crazy cannon, looking down at the game and freezing my ass off. Only I wasn't watching the game too much. What I was really hanging around for, I was trying to feel some kind of a goodbye. I mean, I've left schools and places I didn't even know I was leaving them. I hate that. I don't care if it's a sad goodbye or a bad goodbye, but when I leave a place, I like to know I'm leaving it. If you don't, you feel even worse.
I was lucky. All of a sudden, I thought of something that helped me know I was getting the hell out. I suddenly remembered this time, in around October, that I and Robert Titchener and Paul Campbell were chucking a football around in front of the academic building. They were nice guys, especially Titchener. It was just before dinner and it was getting pretty dark out, but we kept chucking the ball around anyway. It kept getting darker and darker, and we could hardly see the ball anymore, but we didn't want to stop doing what we were doing. Finally, we had to. This teacher that taught biology, Mr. Zimbesi, stuck his head out of his window in the academic building and told us to go back to the dorm and get ready for dinner. If I get a chance to remember that kind of stuff, I can get a goodbye when I need one. At least, most of the time I can. As soon as I got it, I turned around and started running down the other side of the hill, toward old Spencer's house. He didn't live on campus. He lived on Anthony Wayne Avenue. I ran all the way to the main gate, and then I waited a second till I got my breath. I have no wind, if you want to know the truth. I'm quite a heavy smoker, for one thing. Well, that is, I used to be. They made me cut it out. Another thing, I grew 6.5 inches last year. That's also how I practically got TB and came out here for all these goddamn checkups and stuff. I'm pretty healthy, though. Anyway, as soon as I got my breath back, I ran across Route 204. It was icy as hell and I damn near fell down. I don't even know what I was running for. I guess I just felt like it. After I got across the road, I felt like I was sort of disappearing. It was kind of a crazy afternoon, terrifically cold and no sun out or anything, and you felt like you were disappearing every time you crossed a road. Boy, I rang that doorbell fast when I got to old Spencer's house. I was really frozen. My ears were hurting and I could hardly move my fingers at all. Come on, I said right out loud, almost, somebody open the door. Finally, old Mrs. Spencer opened it. They didn't have a maid or anything, and they always opened the door themselves. They didn't have too much dough. "Holden," Mrs. Spencer said, "how lovely to see you! Come in, dear. Are you frozen to death?" I think she was glad to see me. She liked me. At least, I think she did. Boy, did I get in that house fast. "How are you, Mrs. Spencer?" I said. "How's Mr. Spencer?" "Let me take your coat, dear," she said. She didn't hear me ask her how Mr. Spencer was. She was sort of deaf. She hung up my coat in the hall closet, and I sort of brushed my hair back with my hand. I wear a crew cut quite frequently, and I never have to comb it out much. "How have you been, Mrs. Spencer?" I said again, only louder, so she'd hear me. "I've been just fine, Holden." She closed the closet door. "How have you been?" The way she asked me, I knew right away old Spencer had told her I'd been kicked out. "Fine," I said. "How's Mr. Spencer? He over his grip yet?" "Over it? Holden, the way he's behaving like a perfect— I don't know what. He's in his room, dear. Go right in." Now that you've finished reading, we'll discuss some of the things that you may have noticed when you read. Who would like to share anything that stood out to you or that you found to be noteworthy in the text? Yes, Holden is being kicked out of school. Has he ever been kicked out before? What does that imply about Holden? Yes, it may mean that he has behavioral issues or that he doesn't like school. What else did you notice? He doesn't get along with his parents? What makes you think that? What evidence is there in the text? Good. He has a lousy childhood. His parents were touchy as hell. Make sure you are underlining or highlighting these phrases because they reveal something important about Holden's character. Anyone else want to share? Yes, he was the manager of the fencing team. How does he feel about that position? What makes you think he didn't really enjoy it? Excellent job. That is just the kind of inference I want you to make from a careful reading. Holden seems sarcastic when he calls being the manager a very big deal. He also thinks that causing the team to forfeit and being ostracized is funny. What does this imply about Holden? Absolutely right. He has different priorities than most of his peers. To them, a fencing tournament is a huge deal, but to Holden, it's completely insignificant. You all have done a wonderful job of finding underlying meanings in the text. Now we are going to go through the text together. I am going to point out some of the clues that can be found within the text. When I highlight something or make a note in the margin, you should do the same in your copy of the book. The very first sentence of the book is telling. He says, "If you really want to know," implying that he is insecure and unsure of the interest of his audience. A second clue is his use of direct address. "If you want to know, you'll want to know." This shows that he's talking to someone, perhaps the reader or perhaps someone else, an unseen audience in the book. The next few sentences about his childhood and his parents imply that perhaps he is speaking to some sort of psychoanalyst or therapist. His awkward starts and stops throughout the chapter reveal that he is self-conscious. The diction throughout this paragraph gives away Holden's age. His use of slang, such as crap or stuff, curse words like hell or goddamn, and exaggeration. They would have about 2 hemorrhages apiece if I told anything pretty personal about them. All this reveals that he's a teenager. Another important piece of information is that he had to come out here and take it easy. Where did he have to go, and why? These are questions that you could write in the margin, so you can be looking for the answer as you continue to read the book. About halfway through the paragraph, Holden completely digresses from his topic, going on about the irrelevant subject of his brother and his career as a writer and later in Hollywood. This digression shows that Holden is rather confused, in an unstable state of mind. It also reveals that he does not like anything that compromises integrity for material gain. In the second paragraph, Holden shares a flashback to his last day at Pensy Prep. He quickly digresses again, this time revealing his distaste for hypocrisy and false fronts. He prefers blunt truth. More examples of his tendency to exaggerate show up when he says that Pensy advertised in 1,000 magazines, and that you were supposed to commit suicide if Pensy lost a football game. The imagery of the scene he describes next is important. He is standing at the top of the hill, alone. This shows his isolation from his peers, as well as his perceived superiority over them. He has risen above the pettiness of his classmates, both literally and figuratively, and now looks down on it. In the next paragraph, Holden digresses again, describing the headmaster's daughter. This time he reveals that he is not shallow like many of his peers. He sees beyond her looks, recognizing her sincerity and liking her for it. At this point, Holden finally moves forward in his story. He tells us that he was going to say goodbye to his history teacher, Spencer. The fact that he would take the time to say goodbye to someone at this school, which he has made clear that he hates, reveals that his teacher is of special importance to him. Next, we find out that he is being kicked out for flunking his classes and not applying himself. We already pointed this out, but it is worth mentioning again because we need to find out why he chooses not to apply himself despite several warnings. This entire paragraph is a good example of how Holden seems to be speaking in a stream of consciousness. He just lets the thoughts come out of his mouth as they pop into his head. He's essentially thinking out loud. He digresses again when he talks about the number of crooks at Pensy, revealing his distaste for the mentality of the rich and privileged. As he continues on with his flashback, he mentions that he has left many schools and other places in the past. This shows that his life has been unstable and insecure for some time, which may be the reason behind some of his issues. At this point, Holden is trying to feel some kind of goodbye. He is trying to come up with some sort of happy memory about Pensy so that he can leave on a good note. He has to think hard to find a good memory, implying that his time there resulted in mostly bad memories. But his desire to leave with a positive thought shows much about his character, although it contrasts with his seemingly cynical attitude. In the next paragraph, Holden describes how he ran full out to Spencer's house. He tells us that he used to be a heavy smoker, implying maybe some sort of addiction problem. He goes on to assure us that he is pretty healthy. This is important because it lets us know that the circumstances of his being sent away somewhere have nothing to do with a physical ailment, but rather a mental one. As he continues to run, he shares his thoughts about disappearing every time you cross a road. These thoughts seem deeply philosophical, especially for a teenage boy, revealing once again that Holden is not a normal teen. Holden again reveals his insecurity when he amends his assertion that Mrs. Spencer likes him by saying, "At least, I think she does." In observing his interactions with Mrs. Spencer, it is clear that Holden is a very polite boy who cares about the health and happiness of an elderly couple. This is in stark contrast to his apparent delinquency demonstrated earlier on in the chapter, but it reveals his innate goodness. At this point the chapter ends, but already we have a good understanding of what sort of person Holden Caulfield is, and some of the problems he is dealing with. Having read this chapter, are you interested in finding out what happens to Holden throughout the rest of the book? Do you feel that he is a relatable character? I'm glad that you're excited to read this novel. I'm sure that you will enjoy it.
Before we do our next assignment, I want to point out that although I do not expect you to spend as much time closely reading the entire book like you read this chapter, I do want you to be on the lookout for language or situations that reveal things about Holden and his story. Do not just read to understand the literal plot of the book. You need to read carefully enough to make inferences about the text. Now we will move on to a formal assessment. I need to make sure that you are capable of using evidence from the text to make and support inferences. You will use your annotations to independently write a critique of the text, focusing on the aspects that characterize the speaker and set the tone of the novel. The assessment should be about 1 to 2 handwritten pages. I have a list of key points that you should be able to glean from the text. You should have at least 15 inferences or pieces of evidence. You may start now and finish at home. It will be due next class. Good job today.